Welcome back, everybody, to the Omega Metroid Podcast, the only weekly Metroid podcast out there. Of course, I am your host once again, Dak, alongside Doom, and we also have a special guest on the show, and I'm going to introduce them right now. Let's get right to it. Lillith with 3 L's, actually, community manager here at Omega Metroid. Lil, how you doing? Welcome to the show again.
I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having, a little bit of time in your schedule to join us to talk a little Metroid. So I'm excited to have you, and I'm really happy that you have that Kirby in the background. That is great. Another special guest on the show, and then of course Doom once again with a sick. Is that a Tech 9 shirt that you're wearing?
Yeah,
right now?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Doom, how you doing,
I
man?
believe it's from the Dominion album, but yeah, I have a few of them. Big ol'. I'm glad you're a Tech 9 fan too. Yeah, he's a fun live show, by the way.
I've never
Really
seen
fun
him
live
live. I've
show.
never seen him live, and I'm not a huge Tech 9 fan, but there are a number of good Tech 9 songs. But I know you also went to see something else recently. You gonna tell us about that real quick?
Yeah, actually, last week was pretty eventful. There's a couple things. So I saw another concert last week. I finally saw Disturbed live. Oh wow!
Oh wow. Really? You saw
Yeah, yeah.
Disturbed?
Oh my
Like burying
gosh.
the lead. I didn't know that. That's
Oh,
sick. I would love to see Disturbed.
Yeah,
Okay, go on.
Yeah, I was originally supposed to see them before the pandemic, but well, all that happened. So
Mhm.
finally got to make up for that. They played a couple of songs that I wasn't expecting to hear. Some B-sides, some rare stuff they don't usually play live. So that was pretty cool.
Mhm.
Pretty cool to hear. But yeah, obviously the big event that everyone's talking about and memeing about online is Barbenheimer, the event that is blowing up the movie theaters, and
Yes,
I got to
yes.
see. Yes, I got me and my homie. We got dripped out. We saw both opening night. Both are fantastic movies. You can't go wrong with it. I will say, do not watch Oppenheimer with your parents. I'll just say that.
Okay.
There's a couple of without going into too much detail.
Okay.
There's some scenes. That's all I'll say. Nonetheless, though, both fantastic movies. You can't go wrong with either of them. Absolute must-sees, if you have some time off.
Nice. So which one was better? If you had to pick one. Which one was the better movie?
Oh, what was the better movie?
Like which one
So,
which one did you enjoy more?
Okay, so if we're talking objectively,
Sorry.
if we're talking objectively better, it's obviously Oppenheimer. But my
Sorry, yeah,
personal
what did you enjoy
enjoyment,
more?
honestly,
Oh yeah, okay.
personal enjoyment, I gotta go with Barbie. I'm not gonna lie, man.
Wow,
Barbie.
okay.
The thing with Barbie, and I don't want to spoil this movie, but near the final act of the movie, it goes in a direction I didn't expect it to, and it
Okay.
actually has like a really surprisingly poignant like life lesson almost, and it had a really positive like obviously I knew it was gonna have a positive message, but it had like
Mhm.
a really mature message that I was not expecting from a film, especially with the way it was advertised. I was expecting kind of a goofy, feel-good comedy, but it actually has a lot of heart felt through it. And I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. So yeah, definitely check it out. Definitely check out Oppenheimer. Again, you can't go wrong with either.
Okay. Lilith, did you see either of these movies?
Not yet. I'm
Okay.
like really, really looking forward to seeing the Barbie movie though. I'm trying to get somebody to go with me because I can't like fathom seeing a movie by myself. I don't know. It's like
Really?
I
Never gone to the movies by yourself? Just a good old
no, I've
like
actually
really?
never done that before.
Hmm.
Maybe I might do that. Maybe for the first time in my 31 years, I might do that.
I recommend it. I mean, personally, I feel like of all the things you can do by yourself, like a movie is, everyone's in the dark. No one sees who you're. Who cares? Like
Yeah,
everyone's just there to watch. Like you just
that's
pull up and
true.
watch a movie and leave. Like I saw the most recent live action Spider-Man, so not the animated one, but the one with obviously they brought back all the old characters, or No Way Home or whatever. Saw that by
Yeah,
myself the
the
first
like all
time. That
like
was
the
sick.
multiverse like stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
great. I was
that's
like, I didn't
cool.
care. I didn't need people with me. I'm like, I'm looking forward. I'm watching the
They're
movie.
out there. Like cool. Yeah, I
Yeah.
might do that.
Definitely recommend it. I haven't seen either of them either. I have tickets to see Oppenheimer in or not HD. Well, obviously HD in IMAX.
IMAX.
In IMAX. Thank
Oh
you.
my god, IMAX.
This Sunday. Yeah. Well, if I go to the movies, I only see stuff in IMAX usually, unless it's not showing in
It's like one
IMAX.
of those things. If you're gonna spend the money, you may as well like
Exactly.
go the full 9 yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I usually go for like those big spectacle movies. Like you got to see it in theaters. Otherwise, I'll just wait until it comes out on streaming. Which
Totally.
I think I'll end up seeing Barbie in theaters just to like see it in theaters. I feel like everyone's seeing it that way. But it's also one of those movies where like I'll watch it on streaming when it comes out. Like I'm not Oppenheimer. I feel like is a movie I need to see in theaters. Like I need to see that
Mm-hmm.
in IMAX 100%. Barbie, like, do I need to see that in IMAX? I'm sure it's a great movie,
Right.
but I don't know if I need to like. It's not like a Dune or something, or Star Wars or something like that. But I could be wrong.
The advantage
Could be
of
wrong.
seeing it in theaters is more so because of the crowd effect. Like obviously, like
Okay.
the special effects. Like
That's a good.
you don't
point.
need to
That's
see
a
it
good
for
point. I
that.
didn't think of that.
But yeah,
Right.
that live setting and that crowd and kind of playing off all that. That's I feel like is a unique experience you want to get.
That's a feeling that I got like when
Did not consider that. Yeah.
we went to go see the Mario movie. Like that was so
Mm.
much fun. Just the audience was just like the vibe in the whole theater was just it was out of this world. Like everyone was just screaming. So yeah.
Yeah, or even back when like the MCU was actually good. You know,
I was about to say,
back in
yeah.
those days.
Like Endgame was like you needed to see that in
Endgame
theaters. You need to be there.
Endgame
It was an
and
event.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was literally it was like going to a concert, like going
Yeah.
to watch Endgame. Like probably one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever had.
Absolutely. People are screaming in the stands. It's just like, oh my gosh.
That's the thing is both these movies feel like an event though. Like you gotta see both. So that's why I'm like, all right,
Right.
if I'm gonna see Oppenheimer in theaters and IMAX, I'm gonna go see Barbie. And if I'm gonna see Barbie in theaters, I'm seeing it in IMAX. Like I'm gonna see it like biggest screen as I possibly can. So
There you go.
that should be hype.
Absolutely.
Well, moving on from movies, of course, one of our favorite things in the Metroid world is, of course, talking about Metroid rumors because we get like the same 3 or 4 over and over again until the game comes out eventually or doesn't. So Metroid Prime Remastered finally came out, and that was kind of the big rumor that we talked about every couple months. And now it's Metroid Prime 2 Remastered rumors that it is the torch has been passed, so to speak. And Metroid Prime Remastered came out. It's like, okay, it's like that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles meme where like they're all young and then later on like they're walking with a Splinter who's gotten really old. Like Metroid Prime Remastered had its time in the rumor sunshine, and now it's time for Metroid Prime 2 Remastered to be the rumor king or queen. So
They grow up so fast.
Doom. So did you listen and Lilith? I'm not sure how much you've heard about this rumor, but Doom, I'm pretty sure you listened to the podcast itself where Jeff Grubb was talking about this. I listened to it for like a brief moment. I went to like the timestamp and he said, and I quote, it's Metroid Prime 2 Remaster probably is coming out relatively soonish, throws his hands up in the air, makes a bunch of noise, and then says, that's probably happening relatively soonish. And then he moved on to Zelda. Apparently he also said he added that it's going to be this is according to like a Game Rant article I read. He also added, I didn't hear this, but he also added it's going to be something that, quote, mostly what people want. He said the game would have modern controls and HD visuals, but wouldn't receive the quite same level of polish as the remaster of the first Prime did. Doom, is that accurate to what you heard or not?
Yeah, roughly speaking. So this goes back to about a year ago, where we actually covered this on one of the other podcasts. Where basically, so this was back at this point. The trilogy rumors had ended, and now everyone was kind of focused on Metroid Prime Remastered.
Yes.
And the big question at that
The original Torchbearer was trilogy. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. and people were wondering like, okay, well, is it just going to be Prime Remastered? Like, what's going on with 2 and 3?
Where's the
And
rest of
Grubb
it?
was kind of, and then after Grubb was kind of the first person after, kind of Prime Remaster became the big one, who came out and said, I can confirm that Prime 2 and 3 are being worked on, not quite to the same extent as Prime 1, that Prime 1 was going to be the quote-unquote big boy remaster, but that Prime 2 and 3 would be coming later down the line. And so he brought it up again in the in his Last of the Nintendogs podcast with Mike Minotti. And honestly, I think it's kind of a nothing burger, if I'm being honest. Like, cause and the only reason I'm saying that is because regardless whether or not you trust Jeff Grubb or not, he doesn't really divulge any new details that he hasn't before. It's mostly just reiterating the same information. The only new details that his source gave to him is, like you said, quote, that it's coming relatively soonish, which frankly could mean anything.
Could mean
Relatively
anything.
soonish. Yeah.
Yeah,
Someone else.
Yes.
Yeah, relatively soonish could mean next year. It could mean next direct. It could mean so many different things. So I don't really think there's enough information for like people to start like really going hard or hype on it. But nonetheless, I think it's I think it's a fun possibility to think about
Mhm.
maybe it dropping next direct. So
Before I ask you, Lilith, on your take on this, just real quick, I was listening. Maybe he said this multiple times. I heard him say this on a YouTube video, and maybe it was a YouTube version of the podcast you're talking about. Anyway, just how he talks about like the information he has reminds me so much of like wrestling journalists where like things change, plans change, they have like barely bits of information which is like cobbled together with speculation and stuff, and like just how even his mannerisms, I'm like, if you could just change like a couple words and names and he could be absolutely talking about AEW or something like that. And I just thought that was really fascinating because I think there was this kind of like, I don't know, a lot of people who do like, they don't like leakers because like, oh, they said one thing and then something else happens. Where like, especially in the game development world, things change, I'm sure, month to month, year to year, of course. And these people are just reporting on the information they have at the time. I just feel like it's kind of interesting because I've never actually listened to one of these podcasts. I've never listened to the source itself of where these rumors, like, or the talk of the rumors comes from. I just see like a tweet about it or whatever. Never actually listened to the guy actually give the speculation or give the information he has, and how. And now having listened to it, I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know. I just kind of picked that up. Well, so I don't know if you've been kind of keeping up with it as much as like maybe Doom and I have, or at least Doom has, in terms of the actual story and progression of this rumor. Any thoughts on that? And then maybe just thoughts on, a Prime 2 remaster happening relatively soonish, possibly?
Honestly, my personal opinion, that's probably the one remaster that I want the most.
Mm-hmm.
Out of like, I love the entire trilogy, but I two was like a special, like it has a special place in my heart, and like I would love that. It'd be fantastic, and I've wanted it and believed in it since. And every time anybody talks about it, I'm like, yes, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
cool, let's go. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Doom and I would definitely agree. This is a game that we'd love to also see
I
remastered
think
for a lot of people. I'm sure they would agree as well.
I think it deserves more. It deserves more of a spotlight, and I think now
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, so much longer on, it has more of a chance to like actually get like the, not like notoriety, I guess is the word, but like it'll get like it'll be like real. It's just, I love the game.
Yeah, maybe get
mhm.
like more of the praise it deserves. Not that it hasn't been
Yeah,
critically acclaimed, but I think there's a lot of people who aren't aware of how good it is just because they've never played
right.
it.
And it's
Yeah.
like, I feel like it's always been like the weird kid out of the trilogy, and like
Mm-hmm.
it deserves a little bit more of a spotlight, I think.
I
Um,
definitely agree there. Doom, your thoughts on that? I mean, I'm sure we're gonna jump more into like the legacy of the title, but I'm sure you would agree it's definitely one of the, like, in a way, underrated. Even though if you ask like a Metroid fan, like, it's very highly rated.
Yeah, because I feel like because Prime One obviously is Prime One. Like it has in the gaming community, even if you haven't played Prime, if you're in the
Mm-hmm.
Nintendo community, you've heard Metroid Prime. You've heard you've watched the top games of all time list, and you've seen that pop up. You know that legacy. Prime Three. A lot of these Zoomers, these late millennials, they grew up in the Wii era, and so they have a lot of nostalgia for that library, and so they might recognize Prime 3.
Yeah.
Prime 2 came out at a weird time in the GameCube. Well, not necessarily time in the GameCube's life, but like, I think Nintendo was expecting, Prime 2, to sell even more than Prime, and it did quite the opposite, in fact, because they
Yeah.
decided to release it within weeks of a ton of critically acclaimed titles such as Halo 2, Half-Life 2, MGS3. You all know the whole story then.
it's
But
like,
yeah, it's a really interesting title because again, it's like, I think most people would say that the first title is probably better, but like even those people, myself included, like Prime 2, it's still so much there in quality. In fact, I would even argue I think there's a significant portion of stuff that Prime 2 does better than Prime 1, even
Mm-hmm.
though Prime 1's my personal favorite.
yeah. Like I was talking about it earlier. Like, I don't know if like either of you guys saw my tweet, but like I was like I know Prime One like the back of my hand, but like, and then like Super like the back of my other hand, but like Prime Two, like is my favorite in the trilogy because it just does so many things right, and it's
Mhm.
just so amazing on so many levels. And I'm like, I don't know if it's because I was the age that I was when it came out and like the way like I experienced it or whatever, but it resonated with me, and it was really cool. And so
Yeah, and we're gonna talk more about like the general legacy of the game and kind of look back on it a bit more in those veins later in the episode, which is why we're talking about kind of all this in general because this is very much a Metroid Prime 2 themed episode. Before we move on from the rumor, real quick, I feel like I have to say something about this real quick because I felt before Metroid Prime Remastered came out, I could kind of see Metroid Prime Remastered coming out with like a full polish, full HD visuals as it did, and then like 2 and 3 coming out. Maybe it's just as ports, like kind of just bundled together, like the rest of the game is kind of thrown on the Switch. Now, having seen Metroid Prime Remastered, I just can't imagine that they would do a Prime 2 Remastered and not have it be on the same level, like graphics wise and polish wise overall, as the first Metroid Prime Remastered.
right.
And now having seen what it's like, I just, to have them both side to side in the library and one of them clearly not being as touched up as the other one, I think would kind of do it a disservice.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, did you all feel the same way? Because now when I saw this again, I was like, there's just no, I just can't imagine that they would do that. They wouldn't go to the same level of remaster as they did for the second game as they did for the first game.
I mean, it's Nintendo. I could absolutely. I don't want them to do that.
Yeah.
I want Prime 2 and 3
I guess.
remastered
Okay.
to be on
Yeah.
that same level. It's Nintendo.
Yeah.
You know, common sense or the obvious choice isn't necessarily the obvious choice.
It's not necessarily what they're gonna do, but like I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, I can't imagine them doing 2 or 3 in any like lesser capacity than they did 1. Like, come on, like, please, all you're gonna do is upset people.
Yeah.
I will say, like after the Pikmin 1 and 2 ports, I was expecting Primes 2 and 3 to be somewhat similar, but according to Grub, it sounds like Prime 2 is going to be a standalone release and not part of like a bundle with Prime 3, and it sounds like there is going to be, while not quite as much work put in as Prime Remastered, more work put in than there was in those Pikmin ports, at least from what he's aware of.
Well, that's the thing, is that if they were getting bundled like Pikmin 1 and 2 in a 2 and 3 situation, then I can understand, like, it was just kind of like touched up port, and it wasn't on the same level. Like, that's okay, one thing. Like, you
Right.
release them, give them dual analog controls, whatever it is, touch them up a little bit, bundle them for 40 or 60 bucks, whatever it is. I'd be happy with that, but I would still be like, that's a missed opportunity to really have it truly remastered. Now that it's an individual release, which I assume they would charge $40 for again. I don't think it would be $60, but I don't think it would be cheaper than that. So it'd still be kind of a full game release to some extent, like Metroid Prime Remastered was. I just can't see them like, okay, here's another game that a third of you played back in the day, if you were around playing games back then. And also it doesn't look as good as the one we just released, which is also a remake or port or remaster or whatever. I guess if they shadow drop it, they shadow drop it. But I feel like I would hate to see Prime 2 get like remastered like that and not really get remastered, especially when it has an opportunity to outsell the original on the GameCube. Because, I mean, Doom, you hinted to that earlier, Prime 2 did not sell as much as the original Prime. I want to say Prime 2 is only sold less than 2 million units, I think.
Yeah, it sold 1.5, I believe.
1.
So about
5,
over a million less than a Prime 1.
And Prime Remastered, I want to say, sold just about that on the Switch. So, I mean, there's a very good chance that Prime 2 Remastered sells around the same, if not more, lifetime on the Switch than the original release on the GameCube does in all its subsequent releases. So, just something I would hope that wouldn't be hindered by the game not being, on par with Metroid Prime Remastered, which the game itself, as you were mentioning, Lillith, might end up being, in Doom 2, better than the original Metroid, and to not having to be given the same treatment, or Metroid Prime not to be given the same treatment, would be a shame.
Yeah.
So let's jump into that. I actually have my notes in reverse. We want to talk about a couple of things. Doom, this was a great suggestion. So we're thinking about things we want to talk about. The Metroid Prime 2 remaster rumor came up, and we're like, Doom's like, hey, why don't we just do a Metroid Prime 2 kind of themed episode? We have Lillith on as well, who loves the game. So a great opportunity to talk about Metroid Prime 2. It's a game that I got to jump back into and play. I haven't played in quite some time, and I wish it would come out on the Switch because then it would be very easy for me to just pick it up and play.
Yeah. Um,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, like real quick, like I'm sorry to jump in there, but like just saying like it's easy, like you saying it's like it's easy to just jump in and play it on the Switch. Like my husband he tried to play like the original Prime game like back in the day, and he never did, and now he's got the opportunity to do it now, and it's just it's more accessible. Like it's nice that it's so much more accessible, like, and it looks nicer. So, yeah.
And not just that, but also the control enhancements too. I mean, you
Yeah.
ask someone, you ask someone to play those original tank controls,
Oh my God. No,
who's never experienced that before.
exactly.
Yeah.
He traded it in for Billy Hatcher back in the day. Like
Yeah.
he tells me that story all the time, and I give him crap for it. Like always. I'm just like, really, you could just stick it out just for a little bit. But no, the fact that they like updated the controls, and he watched me play it, and he played a little bit of it of the remaster, and he's just like, yeah, this is so much easier and like so much more. It's not easier, it's more intuitive. It's like what I say. I'm like, I love the old school tank controls. Like I that's got a very special place in my heart.
It's easier to adjust to, it's more
Right.
comfortable. You don't have
Yeah.
to like
more intuitive.
you can go on autopilot more when you're on that controls. You're not intuitively thinking about
You can like
each individual
more
action
what's
in the
going
present.
on in the environment and in the game, and not have to be like, okay, I need to like press X, Y, and Z and like R and like L and like shoot this and like yeah. So yes.
But that's a good point because bringing the game to a remastered level on the Switch does so much for it in accessibility means, like, not just in terms of it literally being accessible for more people to buy, but then the game itself is just more accessible. Like, they added more sensitivity options, they added like a colorblind mode, they added more control schemes, they added display options that the original didn't have. So in those ways, it's also way more accessible for people who might, even if they could have played it back in the day, might not have been able to because of the lack of accessibility options. So there's that as well. And I guess we can jump right into this. And Lillith, I want to throw it to you again. So we're going to talk about on the episode just the general, like, looking back on Metroid Prime 2, retrospective on it, and kind of its legacy, and then changes we'd like to see for, if any, for Metroid Prime 2 Remastered if it does happen. But I want to start with the retrospective kind of first. It was actually flipped on my notes, which is why I said later, but we're going to do it now. So Lillith, I wanted you to kind of, as a Metroid fan, like, what does Metroid Prime 2 like mean to you? Why is it such a favorite game of yours? Why are you like just excited to even talk about the game at all? What does Metroid Prime 2 mean to you?
This is gonna sound like a little like cliche, I guess. I mean, I
Go
think
for it.
I
The more
was
cliche
a
and cheesy, the
teenager when
better.
this game came out. So, it was very much a like, I don't want to say it was like a coming of age thing. It was more of like a it felt just like you go through like, it was just so, it was transformative. You go through different like light worlds and dark and going through all these trials and tribulations and coming through on the other end, and everything is just, it holds such a special place in my heart because like I did that, I played it with my dad and my little brother growing up, and we all experienced it together. And he was younger, my brother's 6 years younger than me, but like we all had a great time, and it was a family experience, and it was great. Like,
Do you remember the first time you ever played Metroid Prime 2? What that was
yes.
like?
It was absolutely horrifying. And that
Okay.
it lives rent free in my brain. Like, I have different branded nightmares of the troopers like waking up and attacking me. Yes, absolutely. It's I was yeah. No, I will always remember the first time I played that. Yes.
Would you say
They're
like?
just come to.
Go ahead, Doom. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say they were just here to talk to you about your car's extended warranty. That's all.
Yeah. Would you say?
PC.
I mean, I wonder if there are even warranties. I feel like warranties would not happen in the Metroid universe. Everything is so risk of blowing up at any time, exploding at any time.
There's a little asterisk at the bottom. She's like,
Yeah.
there are no warranties. There is no insurance. Do not pass go. You cannot collect $200.
So like fighting the Dark Troopers, for example. I'm sure like you can absolutely remember the first time you like fought those off. Would you say like that moment or maybe other moments would be like ones that you just can't wait to see if a remaster were to happen? Because I know that was a topic of discussion on Twitter and elsewhere in the past day or so. Like moments in the game that you really like want to see remastered. Like, would it be like the first time you fought off the Dark Troopers? Like maybe Samus finding one of the corpses there, or maybe the first time you interacted with the Ing or Dark Samus. Like, what's like the first one that kind of comes to you?
Okay, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm just like, I want to see all of it. I want to see all of it.
Right.
But like the one interaction I absolutely want to see remastered and just beautiful HD is just the first interaction where Samus confronts Dark Samus, and it's just that fight. Oh my gosh, like it's just I need to and that and the Sanctuary Fortress. I need to see that.
To clarify, when you or sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Well, I was just gonna say, when you said the first Dark Samus interaction, do you mean that first cutscene where you
No,
interact
that's why I
with her
said
at the
when they
landing site?
fight. That's
the
why
first
I
fight.
said,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like when they fight, like when they actually like shoot at each other, and then you go and like down in the wastes, and you're, you know.
Yeah, the gunslinger standoff. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that like, I want that so bad. Like,
I mean,
yeah, we were just talking about this last week on the box art rankings, man. I love Gunslinger Samus. I love when she's depicted that way.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
Full disclosure, when I was a teenager, I drew out that fight. I drew like a comic of that like gunslinger fight from Prime 2.
I'll definitely remember, like, I mean, that's around the same time where like she's like shooting out as like the dark, like the Ing are like crowding around her for the first time, where she gets attacked by the Ing for the first time. She's like letting those shots fly off and like towards the sky before she gets like thrown back in, getting all of her like power ups removed, and like those early moments of the game, absolutely want to see those remastered. But I can't also wait to see the final moments of the game where Samus walks off from the Luminoth. That's gonna be awesome. Can't wait to see that as well. So like we talked about this a little bit earlier, and Doom, I'll throw this to you first. Metroid Prime 2 is kind of one of those games where like if you ask a lot of like casual Metroid fans, or maybe just 2D Metroid fans, or maybe just casual fans in general, they're like, what's the best Metroid Prime game? They say Metroid Prime. But when you ask a lot of Metroid fans, especially Metroid Prime fans, a lot of them will say Metroid Prime 2 is actually the best one. Is that number one something that like you think Metroid Prime 2 is kind of earned? Like it kind of has that like underrated, like it is actually better than Metroid Prime? And then do you actually think that it is? Like do you think it actually outdoes the original? I think we can just jump right into that. I want to hear what your thoughts are.
But before I do that, can I talk about my history with Prime 2 first?
Oh yeah. Oh, you know what? Doom, you are so right. I want to hear your history with it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, please? No,
Go ahead.
Yeah, Prime 2 is a very special place in my heart because this was kind of the first game where I got sucked into the hype cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was my first hype cycle game. I kind of had that with Mario Kart Double Dash. Like I remember seeing the Nintendo Power ad for that, and I was like, "Yo, there's a new Mario Kart for GameCube! What?" But then I didn't really see anything else about that game until it came out, and so that just kind of happened. Prime 2 was the first game where like I saw the in-game screenshots like months before, and I was like actively following along with it with like, you know, because this time is when we got our first computer in the family, so I actually could like go online and you know I was all up on the insider forums chatting with fellow Metroid fans there. Dak, I know you were.
Yes.
We talked about that. I know you were all there too back in the day.
I was there.
Oh
on
my
Insider.
god, I'm
I was
about
there.
to like have like the insider forums. Oh my god, I wrote a
Yes.
whole
That's a throwback.
fan fiction on that freaking thing. Like, good lord.
Just one
Anyway.
fan
Yeah.
fiction? I definitely had multiple fan fictions. So.
Oh yeah, no, I wrote a whole like virtual reality
Definitely
fanfic
had a bunch of
the
them.
Insider forums back in the day. Yeah, no, that 25 chapters. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's all good, all good. But yeah, this is like the first game where, and at this point too, like I was definitively a Metroid fan. You know, I had gotten and beaten Zero Mission recently, the first Metroid game I ever beat. I was slowly but surely making my way through Metroid Prime. Scared as hell to take on the Impact Crater and Metroid Prime itself, but determined to do it before Echoes came out. And I remember my birthday, which is September 1st. The game would come out in November. I remember the final present I quote unquote opened was a card from my aunt saying that she had pre-ordered the game for me, and that was like the most hype thing I'd ever like gotten at that time. I was like, oh my god, because you know at that time, like, you know, when you're a kid you have to pick and choose your games carefully. You know, like you have to pick and choose your games carefully. So like knowing that I was going to be there day one for Prime 2, that was just like, thank you, Aunt Lisa. So yeah, and then also, I almost forgot the demo disc. So yeah, I was a Nintendo Power subscriber at the time, and Nintendo Power subscribers, if you subscribe to a specific issue, they gave you the Metroid Prime 2 demo disc, and so I lost count of how many times I played through that leading up to launch. Not just the demo itself, but you know, they had a bunch of trailers that showed, you know, footage, probably like E3 footage, but like this was before I had, you know, discovered E3 live conferences, and so this was like all new to me. You had like a Metroid timeline feature that showed like the timeline to this point and introduced me, you know, to like Super Metroid, which I had never heard of before, and stuff like that. And so everything leading up to Prime 2, it was like, you know, it was the first time I'd ever had something like that. Now, you know, nowadays, like, now that we're all terminally online, you know, hype cycles are like fairly normalized, but like, you know, back then, as like that first one, it was really special. Anyways, what was your original question before I talked about
that's totally fine. I should have jumped to you first. That's a good point where you brought up the demo disc, because I remember the demo disc because a friend of mine had it. I didn't have it because I wasn't a Nintendo Power subscriber yet at the time. It would be very soon afterward where I'd become a Nintendo Power subscriber, because what I would do is I would buy the individual copies at Blockbuster. So I wasn't a subscriber. I would just buy them when they got on the shelf there at the store. And a lot of the time they didn't have the discs included in them at all. But a friend of mine had that disc, and I did try it out there as well. I was going to ask Doom something, but he got up from his chair. There he is. He's coming back.
Left the chat. I'm sorry.
Now I'm trying to formulate my thoughts again. But that demo disc that had a concept art on it too that I remember going through a lot, which was really cool.
Oh gosh. There we go.
There it is. Yeah, there we go. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's not. There could be more light on it, but it is indeed the Metroid Prime 2 demo disc.
Yeah, not the most optimal lighting, but you know, we'll take what we can take.
That's wild that you still have that.
That's so cool. That's awesome.
The amount of discs I've given away to GameStop for trivial amounts of money just always pains
Oh god,
me.
You gotta feel it somehow, yo. What?
I still regret trading in Melee. That was one of the worst.
Damn, you traded in Melee? That's crazy.
Traded in Melee.
I think the worst for me was
not one of my proudest moments.
You break my heart.
That's a game like, wow, you really couldn't get more value out of that one. You had to give that one away. Like, that's not a game you just like beat once and don't play again, you know. But
listen, I was a small child. I thought Brawl was gonna have
you thought Brawl. It was Brawl's fault. It's always Brawl's fault. It's always Brawl's fault.
You know, it's okay. You know, nowadays, you know, I have a certain sea mammal that takes care of Melee.
I want to say the worst for me was I got rid of the Master Quest disc I had for the GameCube.
Oh,
I didn't realize what I had. I beat like the games on there, and then I got rid of it, and then later I was like, oh.
There goes your early retirement.
Oh, I like have a physical like feeling of pain in my body right now.
Yep. That's probably the worst one. I will never forget getting rid of that. I mean, I forget getting rid of it. I don't remember, or I won't forget the feeling afterward when I realized what I'd gotten rid of. And that feeling, yeah. Doom, I don't know if you could mention it. Do you remember like the first time you played Metroid Prime 2 when it released? Not the demo disc, but like when it released, like how that felt jumping into it for the first time?
I remember getting past the first room and I was like, "Oh wow, this is a room that was not in the demo. This is there. This is already way different." Yeah, it was really so. It was actually really interesting because there was a Nintendo Power kind of mini strategy guide that went up to a certain point in the game,
I remember
and
that.
I had already like torn through like this part of the guide, so like I had a semi idea of like what I was getting myself into, like about through to a certain point of Aegon Waste. I can't remember the exact point the guide ends,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I don't remember the exact feelings going through my head other than like this unreal feeling of like I am playing. It was the first quote unquote brand new Metroid game that I felt like I was, even though that's technically not true because I technically got Zero Mission like right when it came out, but again, like I didn't play Zero Mission until like I didn't hear about Zero Mission until it was actually released. It wasn't something I'd heard about pre-release and then actively got into, and so it
Yeah.
was again just kind of that hype cycle and that unique feeling, and just kind of I haven't really had a feeling like that since Prime 3, honestly. That was another game where like kind of that long hype cycle. Dread to an extent too, but that's much different for very different reasons, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I it's hard because I mean, Metroid Prime 2 literally came out almost 20 years ago. It's getting close to its 20th anniversary soon. The most I remember leading into Metroid Prime 2 is I knew it existed. Like I was looking forward to it because I knew I was gonna get it for Christmas because it came out in November. So like it's coming out in November. I'm 9 years old. I'm getting it for Christmas. I'm not getting it when it releases. I'm getting it on Christmas Day. And I just remember bugging my mom a ton, and then she like was like messing with me and like wasn't like, oh, I'm not sure if Santa's gonna get it for you. Like not because I'm a kid and she's not trying to outright tell me that she got the gift she got me. And I remember freaking out about it at one point because I was a semi-spoiled 9-year-old at the time, and thankfully,
It happens.
I mean, hey, I didn't raise me, but, but I remember really, really, really wanting it because I mean, I played Metroid Prime. It was one of the. I didn't have a ton of GameCube games. I had a decent amount, but like it was one of the ones I had that I played over and over again. So I was like really looking forward to that. I'm not sure if I ever remember seeing a TV commercial. I'm sure I saw magazine ads for it and like Nintendo Power. I'm sure talked about it, obviously, but I 100% remember asking for it for Christmas and then eventually getting it on Christmas. And that was again like it was just like a few years, a couple years prior when I got Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion for Christmas. It was like, wow, like another awesome, Metroid holiday for me. And back then, 2 years in eternity when you're 9 years old, And so it kind of felt like forever since I had gotten another one, where it was really only 2 years later, which is kind of crazy to think about. And Prime 2, I played, I think that was the game I played all day Christmas. Like I probably got some other stuff, and I think I just played Metroid Prime 2. And at that point, I was already like, I felt like I was built a little different because I remember playing the original Metroid Prime and being scared to go into the impact crater for like a week. By then, I had matured. I was 2 years older. I wasn't 7, I was 9. And I could handle the darkness and the edginess of Metroid Prime 2.
You went through character development.
I went through character development. Yep. And I remember the first time I ever beat the game was on vacation. I think we were in Lake George in New York State. Like it was like a lake house or whatever, with like a family friend or whatever. And I remember beating it in the car because we had a minivan that had we had like a TV set up in the car for like long road trips. It's also where I beat Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door once. And I beat Metroid Prime 2 on that trip upstate. So I remember that. I don't remember the first time I really played it aside from like just playing it on Christmas, but I remember the first time I beat it because I was in the car and we were listening to Van Halen. I remember that as well. I don't remember what song it was, but I know it was Van Halen.
Good band to listen to.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, because my dad was a hair metal guy at the time, probably still is. Yeah, so that was definitely a throwback for me. But
I remember absolutely despising the Boost Guardian, and I assume a lot of other people did as well on their first playthrough.
That's something I want to talk about later. But yes, at the time on the original release,
let's get into that later. Like I'm sure
the original release,
like
Boost Guardian and Emperor Ing were an issue on the original releases. Let me circle back to what I asked. Doom, thank you for calling me out on that. That was bad. That was bad host etiquette to not ask you the same question. So I apologize.
No, it's all good, man.
No. You can rake me over the coals. It's fine. Like, you can crucify me over it. It's okay. Like, I was wrong. I was wrong.
Worst host ever, Dak.
Thank you.
Worst host ever.
Thank you. Don't sugarcoat it. So, and now I'm trying to remember what I asked. So I asked you, like, in general, like, first of all, do you agree that Prime 2, do you personally think Prime 2 is better than the original Metroid Prime? And do you think, like, in general, do you think kind of Prime 2 has earned that, you know, Prime 1 but better name that I feel like other people have kind of given it? Like, it's Prime 1, but Prime 2 is actually the real GOAT. Like, what is your overall general take on the game?
Well, considering Prime 1 is my favorite game of all time, no,
Okay.
I personally don't think Prime 2 is better. But as I talked about earlier, I think there's a lot of stuff that Prime 2 does fairly better than Prime 1 does. And you know, I could definitely, you know, I think it's absolutely valid to say, I mean obviously any opinion is valid when it comes to video games, but like I can absolutely see, like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, you know, why a lot of people who've played both of these would prefer Prime 2. Like,
Right.
you know, as someone who can like see those aspects, I can see like what about that game like especially resonates with people, because the thing with Prime 2, you know, not only is it a quality, on one hand, it is a quality Metroid experience, but it's also such a unique Metroid experience that none of the other games really fully capture. You know, a lot of people compare it to like Majora's Mask, which I unfortunately have not played yet, or Link to the Past as well as another one, which I also
Majora's
have not played.
Mask.
I have not.
And you haven't played
Come on, man.
A Link to the
Come
Past?
on. Come on.
It's on
Sorry.
the list.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
But
Anyway, sorry. Continue.
I mean, I hey, believe it or not, I didn't play Ocarina of Time until 2019. So,
wow.
but
That I think is just kind of like you're going out of your way not to play it. Like, there's no,
Sorry,
how do you
I
not
never
play it?
Zelda.
I never had an N64 as a kid.
I
Yeah,
didn't
but it
either.
came out on Virtual Console like how many times?
I didn't have an N64.
It was on GameCube, it was on
I
Wii, it was
did
on
have
Wii
an
U, it was on
N64.
the 3DS, it was on the, you know, like, it came out on
I
everything.
know.
You had to really avoid that game to not play it.
I got it on the GameCube.
Not to shame you about it, but geez.
It's a very good game. It's a very good game.
I'm glad you think so.
Let's not turn
specifically,
this into a bully doom.
specifically, specifically, I played the 3DS version. But back on topic, but yeah, there's a whole host of things that I think Prime 2 does better. You know, I've talked about it before on the podcast. Prime 2 is my personal favorite Metroid soundtrack. Prime 1 and Prime 2, in my opinion, is like the peak Metroid soundscape, and you know, that kind of general set of themes and sound palettes, #blessed, is kind of the direction that I would like to see in the Metroid series moving forward. And Prime 2 is kind of like the peak and the eclipse of that for me. I especially love a lot of the synth patches that Kenji Yamamoto, the samples as well that he uses throughout this score. I was talking about the Discord earlier, the Dark Trooper themes, and I love this very digital, this kind of digital modern theremin sound. Because you know, you listen to you know, an actual theremin, you know, it's this very kind of 30s 40s kind of sci-fi sound, but like this one, you know, it feels modernized. It doesn't feel something that's like cheesy or goofy. It's something that feels grotesque, terrifying, and uncomfortable, which is like exactly, you know, what I want out of like, you know, a Metroid combat theme.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked you that is because I know Metroid Prime is your favorite game. I was kind of curious, like, is this one of those things where he maybe subjectively loves Metroid Prime more, but thinks Metroid Prime 2 is objectively better? Because I feel like that's been a thought that I've heard from a lot of people. But
so for me, like, I think most of the stuff Prime 2 does better than Prime 1, but I think there's a couple of key areas where Prime 1 does so much better than Prime 2 that it puts it over the top for me, whereas the stuff that Prime 2 does better, it's, you know, it's usually marginally better. Like the soundtrack, for example. Like, both of those soundtracks are like easy 10 out of 10s for me. Whereas, like, you know, I look at the exploration and the map design of Prime 1, and to me, I just much prefer that more free flow kind of, the next upgrade could be literally anywhere. Whereas Prime 2, and it makes sense because of how the game is structured with the light and dark world, but it has this more kind of Zelda dungeon format that I've talked about in the past, where you're primarily in one area, you complete it, then you're primarily in the other area, and then you just kind of rinse and repeat.
Okay. Lilith, your take. So Metroid Prime 2, I mean, I'm assuming it's your favorite. You like it more than Metroid Prime, but do you think it is objectively better than the original?
No.
Okay.
It's one of those things where they both do like I agree with you. They both do different things better. And both of the soundtracks are amazing. They're I've flip-flopped over the years over which one was my favorite. It's gone between 1 and 2 for a lot of years. But I just think the one thing that I think Prime 1 has over 2 is just the exploration. Like I get so lost and just so backwards and just so turned around in Prime 2, and to this day it still infuriates me. Like it doesn't matter what playthrough I do, it's still I'm 31 years old and it still drives me absolutely insane. But like I could like play Prime 1 like in my sleep. I can't do that with 2. So I guess like it's not so much the exploration is easier in Prime 1, but it's just more straightforward, I guess. It's not, it just doesn't turn you around so much. And that's
well, again, the thing with Prime, the thing with Prime 2 is, again, it's that additional Dark World mechanic, and that's
right.
why I think for Prime 2 just would not work with that Prime 1 style of exploration, even though
Right.
that's my preference. For the kind of game that Prime 2 is, like, this was the right decision for them.
Exactly.
I'm glad that they did this kind of more narrow exploration, because, like, you had Prime 1 or Super Metroid style exploration with the Dark World.
Right.
That would be like, that would be not fun to navigate.
No,
That would suck.
not at all. Oh my god. Yeah, that would be terrible.
And especially with the loading times in the GameCube, and I think we can talk about this later once we start talking about stuff we would like to see in a potential remaster. But yeah, especially with imagine like, you think you found the right place, but it's in the Dark World, so you gotta find a Dark World portal in a place that's compatible, go through the loading cutscene, and then you find out, oh no, wait, I forgot, I need this upgrade first. Go back through the portal, go back through the cutscene again, go back, and then like that would be awful.
Yeah.
Like that's probably like my least favorite thing about.
Yeah, I think the original is like, I mean, in some ways I think Prime 2 is a bit like drab in some ways. So like when you're doing all that exploring, like I think Prime 1's a little prettier. But yes, I think Prime 1's exploration is a bit more intuitive. It's not so much like, it doesn't feel like you're fighting the game as much. I think in Prime 2 there are some ways, as Doom described, you're kind of almost fighting how the game was set up to get you from point A to point B. Whereas Prime 1, it's like you said, kind of more straightforward. You have a pretty solid idea of how to get from point A to point B, and you know that if you can't make it there, it's for an obvious reason. You're not kind of slowed down because of loading times and going back and forth to find the right pathways to get from one place to another, zone to zone, light world to dark world, and vice versa. I always kind of, that's why, like, I think to this day, I still think Metroid Prime is like, I mean, subjectively, I think I like Metroid Prime 1 more. Just, I think it's, again, kind of the things like, just, I love the world too. It feels more like a sandbox. But Metroid Prime 2 to me has always kind of felt like challenge mode Metroid Prime. Like,
Yeah,
I know it's a
exactly.
separate game, but it kind of feels like DLC in a way. Like
It's like hard mode of like,
yeah,
with, like,
it's
a
like
different
it's Metroid
thing.
Prime. It's more Metroid Prime for me.
Yeah.
Whereas like Metroid Prime 3 kind of feels like a more distinct game in one way to the other two. That said, Metroid Prime 2 is very distinct because of its ammo system in the dark and light world. So that in and of itself, like Doom had said, it's a very unique experience for a Metroid game in general. I think across the two Metroid Prime games, like Metroid Prime 1 and 2, I think feel closer together, like feel more like companions almost. And then Prime 3 is kind of the other one, which is still really good, but doesn't seem like it has that same connection to another game in the series like the first two do. But I always felt like that kind of like challenge mode, like DLC, like I appreciate it more because I came from playing Metroid Prime. Like Metroid Prime 2 kind of put on top of Metroid Prime. And the Majora's Mask connection I think is great too, because I think it's one of those things where like, okay, like Majora's Mask is the dark version of Ocarina of Time. Like there's that kind of element to it, but I think it's a lot more to that, where like Majora's Mask has those more unique mechanics that are very much specific and distinguish the game itself, that don't show up really anywhere else in the series. Is a bit more challenging than the first one, and I think is also less of a blank slate story wise, kind of like Ocarina of Time is like your kind of generic simple fantasy story, and then Majora's Mask really kind of takes it in a different path, and Metroid Prime is a pretty straightforward sci-fi story, not really doing anything too crazy, and Prime 2 isn't exactly like, an evolution in a huge amount of ways, but it's certainly a different, like slightly different path. I would say it's probably less different story-wise from Prime 1 than Majora's Mask is to the original Zelda, but I think in those ways, there that kind of analogy, the dichotomy is there, I guess, across both pairs of games. What do you think, Doom?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually
You haven't played
interesting.
Majora's Mask, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I can't compare it to Majora's Mask, but kind of going. So this is an aspect. There's an aspect here that I like, that I think Prime 2 does better, and an aspect that I think Prime 1 does better when kind of comparing, how the game tells its story. The actual story itself and the lore and the world building, I love in Prime 2. I think it's a noticeable improvement over Prime 1. I think Retro, they really get to like, stretch out their wings, if you will, and really like get, really create unique stuff. Because like in Prime 1, obviously it's unique storytelling, but most of the stuff they're doing is with, pre-established characters and factions like the Chozo, Space Pirates, Metroid, Samus herself. Prime 2, you have the Luminoth. The Galactic Federation has been mentioned before, but we've never, seen, we haven't really gotten a lot of details about,
Right.
what their military is like. And and we actually get to like hear like the actual thoughts of like the military personnel on the planet, and like what their last log entries were, and all that. And so I love what Retro does here. I love the story that they've created in this environment. That being said, while I like the actual narrative and the lore and the world building better, I think Prime 1 does a slightly better job at actually conveying that information and telling that to the player. Because Prime 2, if you think about it, it like plays, at least when it comes to the main story, it plays its cards pretty early on. Like you learn pretty early on that, the squad that you're trying to rescue, they're all gone, and then you learn pretty early on who their attackers were, and that they're trying to take out the Luminoth and conquer Light Ether and take that all out. You learn that in like the first 30 minutes of the game. Whereas Prime 1's narrative, you learn a little bit, you peel a little bit more of that onion back throughout the game, and you don't really truly understand what's going on, up until like the last third of the game. And so I think Prime 1, the way it tells its narrative, is paced a bit better than in Prime 2, at least when it comes to like that main overarching narrative. But I like the contents of Prime 2's narrative better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Lilith, what do you think?
I think with Prime 2, they were trying to lay the foundation for more of a wider, narrative, and like a series. Like, I mean, then came 3, and now we're supposed to get 4.
I believe.
We all
We're gonna make it happen. We're gonna make it happen.
4.
Yeah, dude, that's a good point though, because I mean, Prime 2, like Prime 1 is very much like it's a lot of setup, but Prime 2 very much expands the story and
like
builds up a lot more of what leads into Prime 3, obviously.
Absolutely. Like Prime 1, it gave us like little bits of like kernels of like, the phase-on, whatever. And then 2 really broke everything open and really kind of like expanded the possibility for this entire like other, narrative exploration, and so it's a little bit more, different and widespread, but like I think that's where they were trying to just, see where they could go with it, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because when I talked about earlier, kind of like the connections between games, I think story-wise, Prime 2 and Prime 3, that's where their compatibility and connection the most, I think, comes in. Like, so much of, like, Prime 1 is so much like it's a lot of world building and but like
Mhm.
very minimal. Like it's set up for like the grander thing. But Prime 2, like I said, that's where things really get blown open. That's where you start to see a lot more like specific character and detail in the grander story. Not talking about like just flavor text and lore, but like
Mhm.
a lot more specificity in the actual story that's going to be told and where it's about to lead. Whereas Prime 1, which makes sense, but it's a lot more open ended. It's it could really go anywhere in a lot of ways in that. And then Prime 2, you kind of very much see the path that it's going to start to go in. And I think a lot of that was built around the formulation of Dark Samus as like the key villain. Whereas Prime 1, there really isn't. There is a villain, but there really isn't a villain for the game until the very end. Like, that's where you're going, but it's not like you're actively fighting the villain throughout the game. Like, Prime 2, Dark Samus is very much like, yeah, Prime 2, Dark Samus is very much in the thick of things from the beginning of things, which of course couldn't happen unless the events of Prime 1 happened. So they go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And that's like I think that's one of the things that I appreciate so much about like the Prime series itself. It's just all so like interwoven and interconnected, and it's all just it's even I like the story.
I love the story of Prime. I love Metroid Prime in general. Yeah. Doom, you have anything to add to that?
Not really, no.
Okay. I wanted to jump into something that you had mentioned earlier. Going back on like kind of just the general legacy of the game, Doom. How Prime 2 was set out to be released around the same time as a few other major games of 2004 at the time. As you mentioned, Metroid Prime 2 sold around a third of what the original Metroid Prime sold. Metroid Prime sold just under 3 million units, and this one, I guess maybe not a third, but like not half. I don't think my math's correct. Metroid Prime 2 sold about 1.5 or so million units around there. Thankfully, it sold enough where there was a Metroid Prime 3. There was a Metroid Prime. Metroid did not die on a million units right there. And I think Metroid in those days still selling over 1 million units was probably good for them. But yeah, I mean, what do you think? I guess Nintendo wasn't really thinking when they had Metroid Prime 2 come out around Halo 2. My thoughts are, I'm assuming, and I'm sure there's been a lot of discussion about this. I think we even talked about this on the show. I have to imagine that there was some kind of like, not counter programming, but more so like, hey, there's a lot of hype around Halo 2. We're going to release a game we think is kind of similar and hope that the big buzz of the Halo 2 buzz will kind of leak over onto, like Metroid Prime 2, like rising tides, lifts all ships kind of thing. There's just general hype for this kind of game, a big sci-fi adventure. Maybe people will be interested in Metroid Prime 2. But yeah, I mean, obviously Halo stomped it. They're completely different systems, but I don't know. Do you think?
And a few other games also stomped it as well.
Well, here's the reason why I bring this up is I think it's really easy to kind of look at it and be like, okay, like they threw out Metroid Prime 2. I mean, Metroid Prime 2 came out on November 15th, right? I think I want to say whatever. Halo 2 came out November 9th, literally less than a week beforehand. Half-Life 2, that was November 16th, literally a day right after Metroid Prime 2. So yeah, not ideal, but at the same time, I personally don't think that Metroid Prime 2's release date made a huge difference. Actually, I don't think Metroid Prime 2 would have sold more or really less any other time of the year. I don't think. It probably sold the best it could have because it was being sold during the holiday season at the time. Because at the end of the day, the GameCube did not have like an install base of players who played FPS games. Like there weren't a lot. There were a couple. There was like a couple GoldenEye games, Geist, the original Metroid Prime. Like there really was like the GameCube wasn't a system that you had if you played those types of games. Yeah. People who bought Halo 2 on the Xbox, I don't think were ever gonna buy Metroid Prime 2 or Metroid Prime whatever if they didn't have a GameCube to begin with. I always felt like it came out around the same time as Halo 2 and Half-Life whatever, which I'm sure made a difference, but were those people ever going to get Metroid Prime 2? I don't think so, because the GameCube didn't have this big install base of FPS players at the time. So I don't know. Like,
I don't necessarily think it's about those players, gravitating towards Prime 2, but more so just Prime 2's marketing just getting completely crushed, and just
That's also
a lot of people just a lot of people just not because think about this, there was a lot of games like obviously Halo 2 at the time, that was the big one. That was like I think that was like, the most pre-ordered game at the time or something like that.
It was like the biggest
like
entertainment release of all time, bigger than like any
it was
movie at
like
the time.
it was like it wasn't just a gaming event. Like that the Halo 2 launch was like a mainstream cultural event. Like it was like on late night news programs. Like it was that massive. But then on top of that, you also had Metal Gear Solid 3. You had Half-Life 2. You had Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Like all of these like insanely hyped games that have also like lasted the test of time too, I should add. Like games that people are like still like revered, games that are still revered today, like by pretty much everybody. And I think I think it makes sense that like you have all these at the time like these juggernaut IPs, and then and then you got Metroid, which is just kind of there.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. You're right. I mean, 2004 was really stacked. Yeah, you had Half-Life
2004 was insane.
Half-Life 2, San Andreas, Halo 2, Burnout 3. You had Unreal 2004. You had World of Warcraft came out. Literally, World of Warcraft came out a week after Metroid Prime 2. So there's another one. Metal Gear Solid, as you said. Ninja Gaiden, the original Ninja Gaiden came out that year.
God.
Yeah, you're looking at that. Obviously, you had a bunch of Madden whatever games. Pikmin 2 also came out that year. Not that it was competing.
The one that everyone says is their favorite.
But like, I'm kind of looking at this, and it's like, when else would they would have released it that year? Because yes, if you release it during the holiday season, it gets crushed by Halo 2. It gets crushed by Metal Gear Solid, World of Warcraft, Grand Theft Auto, Half-Life. Like all these games come out in October, November. But if you release it earlier in the year, it's still competing against. Metroid Zero Mission came out that same year in February, so you don't want to stack two Metroid games again. Though I guess you could do that because you did it with Fusion and Prime. You had the original Far Cry come out in March. You had Pikmin 2.
Resident Evil 4 also came out in 2004.
I feel like that's like when it was coming. I couldn't. Oh gosh, wow.
The original Counter-Strike. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Half-Life.
Everything came out in that year. Good lord.
Ninja Gaiden came out in March, so it's like. Yeah, there were some earlier heavy hitters in the year. I would say that you're probably better off going up against like Ninja Gaiden than like Halo 2 in the holiday season, but then you miss out on the holiday season hype, Like I'm still thinking like, yes, I think you're right, and that's like the major key of this too is like marketing wise, you're getting destroyed. But at the same time, there are other games that released around Halo 2 as well. And those were just really big IPs for those studios. I think the really thing is that Nintendo was never going to put in enough marketing to have Metroid Prime compete, or Metroid Prime 2 compete, regardless of what time of the year it went out. If it was going in March, it was going to get crushed by the games coming out at that time. If it got released in the middle of the year, it was going to get crushed by the marketing for the games later in the year anyway, So it's like, I wonder if there really was, unless they delayed the game or released it a year earlier, a good time to really actually drop it. But I'm assuming any time away from Halo 2 is better.
I feel like, I was going to say, I feel like delaying would probably be the best option. Certainly not optimal. Like not the most optimal time, but like still I think it would have been better to like
maybe to just avoid Halo 2, like
no, unironically, yeah. Unironically. Get out of the way of the train. You're going to get run over.
For the next one, y'all.
Yeah. And that could have made a big difference. That's why I want to see, like, maybe it'll just have I want to see how Metroid Prime 4 goes with some actual marketing and maybe other Metroid Primes too.
Yeah.
I feel like Prime 4 is also like one, obviously we're in a different time, Switch is a different console, but at the same time there's almost like this kind of mythic aura around Prime 4. Although I'm not even sure if.
But it's internet aura.
I'm not sure.
It's internet
That's what I'm saying.
It's people who are on the internet. Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is just my own bubble or not.
That's the thing is that like you can go on the internet and be like Metroid Prime, but like, does the average person even know what Metroid Prime is? Stuff like that, and it still has yet to kind of break that. To break that threshold.
I hope Nintendo tells them.
I hope so.
Or
Well, I would say that we all here love Metroid Prime 2, of course. And we really want, and honestly, I think it's time for me to crack out the old sea mammal and maybe play a little Metroid Prime 2 on PC, but I hope it gets released on Switch soon. But speaking of which, let's say there is a Metroid Prime 2 remaster. Let's say, as Mr. Grubb quotes it, or says it, it's going to happen relatively soonish. Let's say that's the case. I'm going to throw it to you, Lillith, first. What are the changes you'd want to see? Metroid Prime 2 Remaster comes out. It's a little different from the original, or it's not. Maybe you want it to be just one-to-one. But what are changes you'd like to see, if any? Or you could say no changes. But what changes would you like to see coming from what we had originally, or even the trilogy version, because there were differences from trilogy to the original?
Mm-hmm.
What would you want to see? What kind of Metroid Prime 2 would you want to see as remaster? What changes would you like to see, or reverted, I guess, is the best way to put it.
That's a loaded question. Absolutely. First thing I think of is just loading times.
All right, loaded question. No loading times.
I was
I'm
about
with
to
that.
say loaded question.
Yes. Okay. Well, I will be very confident that there'll probably be way less loading screens, which I think a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier will kind of be diminished a little bit.
That's like, honestly, that's probably one of my biggest things that I want is just the loading times to be different. I honestly, like, as weird as it sounds, like, I can't think of like anything else that I want to be like too different.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, if I went through and played it again, because I haven't played it in like at least a couple years, if I went through and played it again, I could probably tell you. But yeah, just the loading times, like
Okay.
that's just sitting there waiting, just the cutscenes, just like yeah, that'd be fine. They're cool and everything. You don't need to watch them every single time, please. Like, gosh.
So let's see. I'm gonna try to. Did you play both the original Metroid Prime 2 and then like the trilogy version
Yes.
as well? Okay. So you know there's like a difference between like some of the boss difficulties for some of those from game to game.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you this. Would you want the difficulty of those bosses to be the trilogy version or the original version?
I want them to be as difficult as possible for everyone to experience them as they were supposed to be.
So you want to be
Like,
closer
because
to
if
the
I have to
original
suffer,
version.
so does
Got it.
everybody else.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked for that,
I am in full agreement.
I fully agree. Yes, that is one thing that I would want to see if Metroid Prime 2 comes out. I mean, obviously, I want to see nice remastered graphics.
Absolutely.
Obviously, I want to see the updated controls like Metroid Prime
Yeah.
Remastered got. I want to play dual analog, but I want it to be closer to the original release. I want specifically the Boost Guardian and the Emperor Ing
Oh my
to
god.
be as hard as they were in the original version of the game. And Doom, I was going to ask you how you felt about that, but you already said we're all on the same page here. Am I wrong?
Every time I have like played like this game, or like every time I've like streamed it, like if I stream the trilogy, they're like, oh, you're not playing like the actual like difficulty of the boss. I'm just like, I've played the original game, guys. Like, I know how hard this is. Like,
Yeah, I'll
You
bust
don't
out
need
the
to tell
memory
me, I
card.
know.
I got the receipts.
Yeah.
like I was there. Like I did. Like.
But so my stance on difficulty is that, you know, I want to accommodate a lot of players. I think that there should be modifiers to make the game easier for players who are, you know, just dipping their toe in the water, as well
Right.
as modifiers to make a more challenging experience for the people that want that. And Dak, we kind of talked about this with Prime Remastered, and I know that you were completely against like auto saves and whatnot, or checkpoints in that game. And to an extent, I agree. I don't think like the higher difficulties should have those, but kind of going to Prime 2, like I wouldn't mind, you know, kind of more kind of training wheel features, if you may, you know, be added to like a new easier difficulty to kind of like, you know, make the experience a little easier for new players, because I feel like for new players that's still going to be a very challenging experience who aren't used to kind of what Prime 2 has to offer,
Yeah.
because it is admittedly a bit much. That being said, though, absolutely get the original difficulty. Hell, make it even harder difficulty than the original. Like, give us a tough as nails, just absolutely spicy difficulty setting that I could just sink my teeth in. You know, I'm a huge fan of all these in Metroid. Huh?
Yeah.
I said hard mode wasn't enough for you.
I loved hard mode for the most part. I mean it it ranked up Thordis a lot more just because just for playing him on hard mode. But yeah, like I love it. I love Dread mode, especially in Metroid Dread.
Yeah.
Give me the harder difficulty options.
I think with like a remaster, like a remake is another thing because they're kind of like remaking the game, but the remaster like this, and I felt the same way about Metroid Prime Remastered. And as I say or think about it, it kind of feels maybe like elitist to say, but like I kind of feel like when you remaster the game, I want people to be able to play it as it was intended, like the original game. So like when I hear something like adding checkpoints, to me it's like, well then you're not playing the game.
Well, here's where I just
let me finish. You're not playing the game as it was originally made. Like it's a different. You're not playing the same game anymore. Like I'm totally fine with having the options, and personally, I would like rather those options be available after you've played the game once, like just to experience it as it was originally the original game. When you start to make like bigger changes like that, like controls are one thing, but like when you add checkpoints, that completely changes the flow of the game, how you approach encounters, how you approach certain areas of the game. To me, kind of changes the game in a fundamental way that makes it a different game to an extent. So like that kind of stuff makes me like not hesitant because it's not like a hill I would die on. Like if they did add them, like I wouldn't be like, oh, blah blah, it's not the same game. Like I really wouldn't care. But like I would like people to experience the game as it was originally intended. So like Prime 2, same thing. Like I would be okay with the trilogy difficulty being in Prime 2 because that was an official release. Like the game was released that way. People might have played it, the trilogy version. That's totally valid. Totally fine. But if they added stuff that was not in any of the original or subsequent re-releases, that to me doesn't seem like it's the actual original experience, but not a hill I would super die on. Doom, what were you gonna say? I forget where your interjection was coming.
Well, I was gonna mention the controls actually, because I feel like that's another point where I feel like we're all in agreement. Like absolutely, like if we had to choose between just the GameCube controls or just the dual analog controls, I think all of us would be in agreement. Like, yeah, do the dual analog controls, obviously.
Yeah.
I feel like that's also, even though it's like obviously all our preferences, I feel like that's still on the same level as like adding a checkpoint. I think that you're fundamentally changing how the game is played to an extent, because you're no longer doing just the stop and point for aiming.
Yes.
But like, didn't they do that for like the trilogy? Like it was like the point and click, and like the one thing with the checkpoints that like I want to point out was like with the Switch, you can immediately hit the home button and it will give you a pause, and you can suspend your game, and you can leave. Like you don't have to I have a habit of doing that. I will suspend my game and I'll put it to sleep.
Yeah, not almost a checkpoint, but it does give you technically like an auto save feature in some ways, by being able to go to the home menu. Yeah.
Well, I think
similar,
checkpoints
similar.
I think checkpoints as in like you die and then you restart at like a specific point.
Right. It's like more of a save station, like a manual save, so to speak. Dude, that's a good argument. My two counters to that would be what Lillith was just pointing at. Number one, that there were other controls that were added that are very close enough to me, dual analog wise, that dual analog is not fundamentally changing the game too much. In Trilogy, you can look and point and move just like you can in dual analog, and that's an official release of the game. That's fine. That to me is fine. It doesn't change the game in a way that wasn't originally intended or in another official release. So there's one. Two, when I went back and played, and this is just, I can't claim that this was ever the developer's intention, but when I go, like, to me, the original tank controls were not the vision of the game. It was a limitation of the hardware they were on. If they had the ability to put dual analog in, they would have. But the GameCube controller really isn't kind of made for that, and wouldn't be comfortable for that. Because when you go back and play it on Dolphin or whatever, and you play it with dual analog or with mouse keyboard controls, you can feel how the game would, like, it felt like it was meant to be played that way. The tank, and that's just they're very subjective. That does not substantiate on anything, but that's how I personally feel about it. Like, to me, the controls are more of a hindrance, whereas the checkpoints are an addition. It wasn't like, to me, like checkpoints weren't a possibility back then. They could have absolutely added checkpoints, and they didn't. They added save stations. Whereas if they could have added dual analog, they I would imagine they probably would, because eventually they did, and they eventually added pointer controls, which to me are close enough of an equivalent to dual analog, because again, you're able to point, look, and move in the originals in the trilogy version with those controls. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily agree that's the same thing. So those are my counters to your argument.
I think in general, I don't think there's anything wrong with your philosophy. Mine just might be a little different, because the way I personally would approach a remaster, in this case, is like, I think you should have the option to play it, as authentically and as close to the original hardware as possible. But then I also think that you should have the option, to be able to modify it, whether that be a difficulty, whether that be a positive or negative difficulty modifier, whether that be controls, whether that be visuals, give you options to modify that experience and tailor it one way or another. Because that's how I look at, a regular release as it is, Metroid Dread, for example. I think the controls are great in that game, but I think there's absolutely no reason that game shouldn't have remappable buttons if Super Metroid did it, almost 30 years ago now. And so, I kind of would treat, I would treat, any release, regardless if it's a remaster, with that same kind of thing, even if that isn't necessarily true to the original game it's based off of.
I agree with that. Yes, I do think there should be options. I just don't think it should be the new edition shouldn't be the default, I guess what I'm saying. Like, they shouldn't.
I agree with that. Yeah, okay. I agree with that.
But if I guess maybe there's an agree to disagree here, I would say that, like, maybe on their first playthrough, like, let's say they added checkpoints, for example. I would say on the first playthrough, maybe you have to unlock checkpoints by beating the game. Maybe that's a bit much, because maybe they would never get that far. I don't know. Like, I would encourage people to play it as the original, but at the same time, if they don't want to play it that way and they'd rather play it with things that make it more accessible to them, that's also their prerogative and doesn't affect me in any way. So
there are safe stations everywhere.
There are save stations everywhere. I agree.
Just go save your game. Like, just go save the game. Like, I'm sorry.
But like other accessibility stuff, I'm totally cool with.
I mean, listen, I don't have an issue with it, but also I can't talk because I've been playing this game for nearly 20 years, and I have so much, like so much of it is just ingrained into me now that I don't even think twice about it. Whereas for a new player, I can definitely see it feeling like a daunting experience.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, when we played it, we were kids. We had this thing called free time. A lot of people, they don't have that kind of free time to be able to, like, sink into a game over and over and, bash their head into a wall. And also, I think that's just, part of
the kingdom.
Yeah, and a part of it is also just changing gaming conventions as well. A lot of that bashing your skull against the wall kind of gaming mentality, was a lot more accepted in mainstream back then, and it's not as much now. But I feel like that's a whole other different
I think it
conversation
still is.
well.
I think it just the audience is so diversified now that there are more people who aren't into that kind of stuff. Because there are games like Elden Ring that just came out that appeal to a ton of people who love mashing your head against the wall until it works kind of thing and the high difficulties.
Mashing the head against the wall.
Yeah, so I think it's still there, just the audience is diversified a bit more, which is totally fine. I think at the end of the day, whatever gets people to play more Metroid Prime or Metroid in general is cool with me. If that means adding checkpoints and whatever it is and people play on their first playthrough, that's fine. I don't have to use them, so it doesn't make a difference to me. And Absolutely. I would hope that if that is like a deal breaker for someone, then that stuff is added. If someone wants like checkpoints, like give them checkpoints. I don't care. If they need checkpoints, it doesn't matter to me. Maybe you don't make it to the save station every time. That said, one thing I want to talk about real quick. I really hope they keep the ammo system. That's one thing that they should not change. I think again, I don't know. I think it would be kind of game breaking if you had a mode where you just had infinite ammo of everything. It wouldn't be game breaking, but it would make the game really easy. But I guess, again, if that's a mode that would be fine and make the game more accessible to people, that's cool. But I feel like that is like a very fundamental part of the game's identity. That, like, to get rid of that, I think would be such a shame because you're missing out. It's
like a different game at that point.
It's a different exactly. It's a very different game.
So this is an example where I 100% agree with you on right here. I feel like because I don't feel like checkpoints. I don't feel like checkpoints, on a new easy difficulty, does it, would like ruin the game experience or make it
That's fair.
inauthentic to that degree. But I feel like taking away the ammo system, it is such a unique feature of this game. I think, Hunters has a more traditional ammo system as well, but like Echoes is like the only mainline Metroid game that has ammo, and the ammo is handled in such a unique way because you replenish it by using the opposite colored beam, which I think is really cool, especially because the way the way the game teaches you how to use it, and then also the secret techniques of the beam as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking in the Discord earlier today, and for people on the podcast who don't know, those annoying dark pirate commandos that always teleport the room and they lock the doors, you can actually take those out with a charged dark beam shot, just like if you were charging an ice beam. And so yeah, really cool stuff there. But yeah, I know the ammo system is contentious, but yeah, this is one where I actually agree. I don't think there should be an ammo modifier, and especially because, like, what would you do with the ammo pack collectibles? Do you just take those off the map if you have infinite ammo? Like,
I wish we had Andy here, because I know Andy is a big Metroid Prime 2 ammo hater, and in fact, I just wanted to go back and check the Discord, and as we've started recording the show, he has jumped in on the conversation and said, and I quote, or maybe I don't quote, but I'm paraphrasing, the ammo system is buns, is what he said. Because yeah, we mentioned this on the show before. Sometimes the things we talk about on the show stem from a conversation we've had in the Discord and vice versa. Shouts to Gameworm, who was also discussing it with me and some others earlier. Yeah, I'm a fan of the ammo system. I think you kind of have to have it and keep it. It's not iconic, but like it's so close to the identity, and personally, it's not very different from having a missile ammo economy.
Like, oh god, you got to pick up super missiles. Like, oh, like
it's yeah. And as I was saying, and I wish kind of Gameworm was here too, because I'd love for him to give his side of his argument as well. But for me, it does not make it does not change. It's not very different from having to get missiles or having to get power bomb stuff or anything like that. You have to kill enemies to get ammo, like you do in really much any other FPS game. I know Andy's big gripe is you have to use different ammo to get different ammo types back, but
that's what I like about it. That's what makes it so unique. That's
I think
the part about it.
I think it's interesting, and also, again, I don't think that's necessarily crazy either. I mean, again, I come from Destiny where, like, I'm used to different types of ammo dropping for different types of enemies. That does not make a difference to me. Like the
ammo you get back is generous too. It's not like you get crumbs back or anything. Like, they give you generous ammo.
I never remember playing Prime 2 and being like desperate for ammo. Like desperate for ammo. Never. I really can't think of many times.
I think a good comparison to make, and I'm actually going to compare this to a feature in another Metroid game that I don't like, but I feel like this would be the equivalent of taking hyper mode out of Prime 3. And despite the fact that I don't like how hyper mode is utilized in that game, I would not want Prime 3 to not have hyper mode, because that is such a crucial aspect of that game. That is a core part of the gameplay. And I feel like it's this... Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's similar to what the ammo system is here in Prime 2. It's obviously not a one-to-one comparison, but it's one of those things where I feel like you can't remove it without taking a part of what makes, the game what it is, whether you like it or not.
And then it's like, what do you do with the Annihilator beam? Like,
yeah,
like, and that's the thing. Like, if you had infinite ammo, then you would have to nerf the beams, and suddenly they would become significantly less cool. Like, your reason the Annihilator is so cool is because you gotta use a lot of stuff. The name. It lives up to the name.
You gotta burn a lot of resources. You gotta spend money to make money. Like, it's the age-old adage. You can't just expect to be given to you. And I think it also works very well thematically with like the survival horror kind of aspects of Prime 2. Like, the game wants you to kind of feel the pressure of, until you have the proper equipment, you got to be in these places and you got to hustle to get across, or you're going to take damage. You got to make sure you have enough of this ammo. And it's not like the game doesn't let you, like, you can get ammo expansions. You can stack it up. I mean, if you're playing the game, like, the game really doesn't like put you in situations where you're really dying for ammo. And I think
like you were saying earlier, you don't remember like a position where you were out of ammo. I unfortunately can tell you I was not very conservative with mine, and I ran out of it. But
well, yeah, I've been in those positions too, where you're loving using it. Yeah.
Right, you can still make a charge shot, and you can still try and farm ammo out of other stuff. You are not stuck without anything. You still have an ability to get stuff, and it's just yeah.
The only time I remember like getting desperately out of ammo is during the Emperor Ing fight, which is the last fight in the game. So I feel like that's an acceptable point. That's an acceptable point to like waste all your ammo.
Yeah, you want to kind of be light on ammo because you're throwing everything at it. You got to use all your stuff, and that I think is what's fun about the game. And I get if it's not everyone's cup of tea. That's totally fine. Right. But like in one way, like Prime 1 is very much like a sandbox. There's a lot less limitations. It feels a lot more like kind of open, and you can use all the ammo you want. Doesn't matter aside from like missiles and power bombs, whatever. But like in this game, it feels like there's a little more challenges. There's like more rules to the game. You don't have as much freedom, and trying to get creative or succeed in those limitations to me feels like more satisfying. That's how I've always felt playing Prime 2 is like when you overcome those challenges. And I get it. You might like. Certainly some people are like, well, the mechanic's not interesting. It's not fun to me, so it's not an interesting challenge. That's not your cup of tea, and I get it. I personally found I like that kind of added little challenge, even if it's not a crazy mechanic. Not everything has to be super crazy. And again, it wasn't like Metroid introduced like 10 ammo types all of a sudden that you have to manage. It's like a game that only has a few bits of ammo and really only missiles to deal with is adding another kind of ammo type or one like real like not a huge stretch. I think it's not. I don't think it's asking a lot of you coming from Metroid Prime 1. If you already got used to like dealing with missile management, I think you can deal with beam ammo management, in my opinion.
It's like you want to go like a step further, you can go into like any of the other like newer games where there's like different kinds of like abilities to manage and stuff like that. Like it's just it's all 6-1. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah. They're also incredible. So not only are they generous with, the quantity of ammo, but like also how they give it to you. Because like, in the Prime games, all the power-ups you have to suck in with the charge beam, but the beam ammo, they will automatically get absorbed into you like when you walk past them. Kind of like how like health does in like, the modern Mercury Steam Metroids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope they keep that part. Go ahead.
I very much appreciate the ammo system. I love the ammo system in Prime 2.
I agree. Mm-hmm. I think that like that's one of the like significant like characteristics of the game. And that would be a shame to not have that come into.
Yeah, absolutely. If they cut that out in the remaster, I honestly
make it a remake in a lot of ways. I think not a remaster.
Yeah, I probably honestly like I probably wouldn't play it. Like if I went through there and they like actually like got rid of that, I probably wouldn't play that. Like I know
that far. I definitely play it, but like, I would probably
game at that point. You know what I mean? It's just like it's not this. It's like okay, cool. Now this is like easy mode, groovy. Like,
well, I'd want to play it at least once, just because I'd be curious, to see what the experience is like. But I probably would prefer the original title at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would definitely play it. I would anticipate not enjoying it as much.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Because it's also one of those things where, like, again, is it like, would I need to die on it? Maybe not, but I would give it a chance. I would give it a chance, because at the end of the day, it's still Metroid Prime. So, like, maybe if, like, they made the difficulty that much higher, then that would be okay. But I would rather them keep this kind of difficulty, so to speak, than just making the enemies have more health or whatever it is to compensate for the lack of difficulty from removing it. So... one more thing before we kind of get close to wrapping this up. I don't know how y'all feel about this, but I hope the multiplayer mode comes back, and I hope that I don't think they need to go crazy with changing it, but I do think like, hey, if it's there, keep it, include it again, and add a little online. Let me play a little online with some friends. What do y'all think about that?
Oh, heck yeah. Yes. I'm so excited.
I mean, I don't need online play with Prime 2. Now, if there was a Prime Hunters remaster, absolutely you got to do online play for that. But like Prime 2, I mean, it's fairly bare bones, fairly basic. I don't really need online play for that. It's something that I would, probably not going to play that often. Maybe we'd have an Omega Metroid.
We gotta have an Omega Metroid night. We gotta have one. Yeah. We gotta have one. Yeah. I agree with you there, though. I would love to see a Hunters remaster over like this coming back, really, though. Yeah.
But
like I'm not opposed to it. Mm-hmm. Like I personally probably wouldn't play it that often, but it's like, yeah, sure, give the full package.
Here's what I think would be really cool is because let's be honest, the Metroid Prime 2 multiplayer mode was kind of like not an afterthought, but like it's not very fleshed out,
Right.
all things considered. They you know, if I remember correctly, like they started with that first and then ended up making the rest of Metroid Prime. Like it was kind of like a testing ground, but yeah, you can kind of see it. It's not super fleshed out. What I thought would be really interesting, if they didn't do a standalone remaster of Metroid Prime Hunters, adding Metroid Prime Remastered, Metroid Prime Hunters Remaster to Metroid Prime 2 in place of Metroid Prime 2's multiplayer. Now, personally, I would just love a new Metroid Prime Hunters in general. I still think, though, that Metroid Prime 4 will have a multiplayer portion to it and not, like, I don't think it's going to be separate releases. Like, I don't think they would do Prime 4 and Hunters 2. I think it would be Prime 4 with Hunters multiplayer and, like, updated. But I think it'd be really cool if they were to remaster Hunters. Like, the campaign is kind of whatever, but I would love the multiplayer. And Metroid Prime 2, the campaign's great, but the multiplayer's in kind of whatever. You take the best of both worlds from both of those games and you mash them together. I don't know. That could be an interesting way to kind of bring it all back, but I would still be down for the original multiplayer. I agree, though, Doom. It'd be kind of one of those things you play it once and maybe not too much after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would almost kind of be like, you know, how Nintendo botched the battle mode in Mario Kart 8 and then finally gave us the real battle mode in 8 Deluxe. Like maybe,
Yes.
although I wouldn't call the Prime 2 multiplayer botched because like it wasn't like intent. It was just kind of like there. It's not why you were buying the game, but like
yeah, it wasn't why you're buying the game. But also with Mario Kart 8, you got to get the battle mode right. Whereas Metroid can kind of in most cases give or take multiplayer. Like they had to fix that. Whereas I think they could just release Metroid. It's actually, I kind of wondering about that. If they do a Metroid Prime 2 remaster, if they just don't even include the multiplayer entirely.
I could honestly see it. I hope not. I hope they release the full feature complete game. But even the Prime 1 remaster, they didn't include the fusion suit, and at least as of yet, they haven't patched it in yet. So
Well, how are you gonna link your Game Boy to your Switch, man? Like.
Like
you link your Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass account.
Oh,
that's what you do.
I don't have extra money to pay for that.
That made so much sense though. Like they could have even had a cool little animation of linking it together and then making
There's
it happen.
so many things that make sense that they can do. Like,
Yeah.
we could be here
Very
for hours.
true.
You know what? At least it wasn't locked through an amiibo.
Oh my
That's
god.
True. That's true. Well, with that said, I know we'll be certainly diving. I mean, I would not be surprised if we dive more into Metroid Prime 2 more in the coming weeks and months, as this rumor, I'm sure, will get spun back up in a few weeks or months, as they usually do. Who knows? Maybe we'll see at the September Direct, which we also know is rumored, as it usually is. First, I'll throw it to Doom, and then actually, I'll throw it to Lillith. You first. Any wrapping up thoughts here on Metroid Prime 2, or maybe the remaster? Anything else to talk about for one of your favorite games of all time? Putting you on the spot.
I was gonna say, putting me on the spot.
I'm sorry.
I personally, I want the multiplayer. I loved the multiplayer. Like growing up, like with my friends, that was like the one hold I had over my friends. I was able to like kick everybody's butts in that multiplayer game. But I feel like if they like expanded like on that and made it online, and it'd be really fun. I don't know that I know that's like really like arbitrary and secondary to like the actual remaster of the second game.
That's what you want to play. I had a lot of fun with it too. I would love to bring those vibes back from when you first played it. That'd be awesome.
1v1 side hopper station, boys. Let's go.
Like, come on. Like, it was just like, I swear, like it was just so much fun. But no, a remaster, it just would be amazing. Just to see the game just with a new polish, and just to be able just to see everything again, just would be amazing. Absolutely. So
wholeheartedly agree. Doom, your final thoughts?
Obviously I hope it's real. I hope it's as close, if not exceeding, in the quality that Metroid Prime Remastered is as possible. My god, I would love to see Sanctuary Fortress on the Switch remade.
Oh
It's my favorite Metroid area, probably my favorite piece of art direction in, cinema, gaming, what have you. That would be incredible. One thing we didn't talk, I talked briefly about the music, but what one really cool part about Prime Remastered is that it uses 48 kilohertz audio, which is for those who don't know about sample rates, basically the original GameCube files had 32 kilohertz, and the industry standard is 44.1. 48 is typically what you see in like DVDs, Blu-rays, etc. And so it's an exceptionally high quality, high definition preservation of the audio that we've never been able to get before. And considering how much I love the Prime 2 soundtrack, even if we don't get a visual, even if we don't get like a visual remaster on the same level as Prime Remaster, I do hope that not just the music but just the sound design in general also has those 48 kilohertz audio files. That would be enough for me personally.
I'm with that. If you say it's gonna be better music and better audio, then I'm always down for that because I don't know any better. One day I'll learn though. Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely echo what both of you said. I had a lot of good times in Metroid Prime 2. It's a game that I want to play more. I wish was like we just as we started at the beginning of the episode, more accessible. I don't have to crack out my Wii or my GameCube or an emulator to play it. I really want to just be able to just sit down and
allegedly.
Well,
allegedly.
There's nothing. I mean, it's legal to say I can use an emulator. I didn't say where I got the files from.
Hey! Obviously you dumped it
I
yourself.
bought the game legally multiple times, and never in any other way. Totally, but yeah,
absolutely.
It's one of those games that I wish more people had played. It's like Metroid Prime is such a good game, and I'm glad that like a new generation of people got to experience it on the Switch. And Metroid Prime 2 is like, man, if you like Metroid Prime, this is more Metroid Prime. It's so good.
Here we go again.
And I remember the hype I had for the game. I distinctly remember giving a big fuss about it, trying to get it for Christmas. Yeah, an exceptional game. So much so it's going to make me sneeze. And my headphones fell off.
Salud.
Excuse me. My headphones fell off earlier. I don't know if y'all saw that, but I sneezed. That time I muted it because I didn't want people to hear more than that. Apologies to everyone listening. Anyway, yeah, a lot of good times in Metroid Prime 2. A game I vividly remember beating for the first time. A really fun departure for the series, and someone who is a big Majora's Mask fan, I did see the parallels of Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask to Prime 1 and Prime 2. Majora's Mask is my favorite Zelda, and I do love it's one of those games where all the Metroid Prime games are so close to each other, and on any given day, I probably will still say Metroid Prime, but there's always times man, Metroid Prime 2 is just as good, if not better, in so many ways. And maybe it was a little more colorful. Probably my only thing. But then again, the Sanctuary Fortress on the Switch, man, I would love to see that. The Emperor Ing, seeing Dark Samus on the Switch in HD. I want to see all that. It's the Dark Samus fight. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. I want even the Boost Guardian. I want to get that.
You know what I want? And this technically wasn't. This technically wasn't in the original game, and maybe this would be more appropriate for Prime 3. I want Red Phazon. I hate how Red Phazon was just kind of this abandoned concept after the Prime 1 Impact Crater. I feel like I want it to come back. I thought that was kind of cool. I want to see it. Probably won't. Probably would not happen, but I want that.
If anything, the Red Phazon needs to come back in Prime 3 if they do a remaster on Phase on and the origin planets. Come on.
I'm down for my Red Phazon. Red Phazon looks dope.
Yeah.
I'll have to see it in HD. All right. Well, I think that is all we have to say about Metroid Prime 2 at the moment. We've said a lot of stuff before. We said a lot tonight, and we certainly will be seeing more about it in the future, especially if this Metroid Prime 2 remaster comes to fruition. Who knows? If we start getting Metroid Prime games every year, I'm with it. Remasters and new games, I'm totally down. Trying to think of anything else I had to say to wrap up the show, but I don't think we had anything else. I do want to say thank you so much, Lillith, aka Lillith with 3 L's, here from the Omega Metroid team, for joining us on the show. And what better game to talk about than Metroid Prime 2 for you jumping on. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And of course, Doom, thank you again so much for holding it down for me. I think it's 3 weeks in a row, 3-4 weeks in a row we've been holding it down here.
Yeah.
On the show. I mean, Andy who? And it's the Dak and Doom show. But no, we're happy to have Andy back. I'm pretty sure he'll be back this next episode, so this coming weekend. For us,
next week we got Mr. Spiteri back in the studio.
He'll be back.
We're gonna have to get a good episode to celebrate the boys reunion.
yes. Looking forward to that. Shouts to Andy. Sure, he had a fantastic time, not only prepping but then actually being part of the Zelda Dungeon Marathon. So, I know he is back and rested up. Hopefully, ready to talk some Metroid. He said he had some new ideas and some new motivation, new spice to life, so to speak, after that awesome Zelda experience.
I was about to say he definitely got the spice for sure in that hot wing challenge.
He did. Yes, he did. Maybe we got to do that, our own Metroid wing eating challenge at some point.
Y'all are on.
I'm down. I you know what I can't wait for, by the way, our next crossover episode, because are we 1-1? Isn't that the record for Omega Metroid to Zelda Dungeon? I
think so.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, it's 1-1 allegedly. I don't know if I would consider that a fair fight. I don't know if I'd consider that a fair fight.
Yeah, I think we need to go back and run the tapes, but we'll run that back.
Yeah, I'm not here to Johns though. I'm not here to Johns.
We'll take our L. We got the rubber match. It's all good. Thank you again for Lillith for joining us. Andy, we will see you all soon on the next episode. And of course, Doom, thank you so much for holding it down with me. Thank you all so much for tuning into the show. Check us out on OmegaMetroid.com and all your favorite podcast platforms, on Twitter or X or whatever it's going to be called by the time the next episode shows up. Who knows what it's going to be called? We're on Instagram and Threads now. We're on YouTube. Last week we did a 2.5 hour episode of me and Doom did one of a box art ranking, which you can also watch on YouTube and follow along with your own tier list. And you can follow along in all our episodes on YouTube as well. I think I plugged everything. I'm Dak_City_ on X. Doom, you're Doomino Cross on X, and Lillith, you're Lillith with 3 L's on X, aka Twitter. So that's how you can find us. And I'm sure we have similar names across other platforms. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been, as always, the Omega Metroid Podcast, your favorite and the only weekly Metroid show out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being a Metroid fan. And we will see you next time on the Omega Metroid Podcast. Have a good one.